So, hey everybody, this is Luke and friend of the channel Jay. We're looking at a few videos from Trinity Radio today, questions for atheists. We just thought it'd be fun to go through these videos, see what the questions are, see what we want to say about them. I don't know, just seemed like fun. So that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, let's see what he's got.
All right, here we go.
The worldview discussions space can be so combative. And when atheists and Christians come up with lists of questions that they don't think the other side can answer, those questions usually aren't genuine. I've never made a list like that, although I've responded to some. Here, I hope my atheist interlocutors will consider these questions deeply without giving glib answers. These aren't meant to be gotcha questions, though I'm not asking for no reason. I expect you will have answers, and I want to hear what the most sincere among you have to say. With that, here are my 10 questions for atheists.
I will say too, before we like even get into the questions, like I was watching like YouTube shorts or whatever of like I don't know, just like normal people, I guess, like doing the whole like atheist versus theist thing, like the thing he
Yeah,
was talking about where it's like atheists can't answer this question or whatever, and it's
yeah,
like really like low level, like it's like shockingly bad, like the kind of like
yeah,
normie discourse about these things.
yeah. It's not probably genuine, as he puts it, like just trying to generate engagement.
What facts about reality that you and I agree are real facts about the way the world is does your worldview account for, but my Christianity doesn't account for, or at least doesn't account for well? And for those of you that would point out atheism isn't a worldview, I'm talking about your worldview that includes atheism. I can't think of any. Christianity accounts for evil, suffering, the existence of other religions, including supernatural events in those other religions, science, and differences among different denominations of Christianity. But I can think of many things that the most common worldviews that include atheism don't answer as well as I think Christianity does. Like universal supernatural claims, universal religious experiences, free will, morality, near death experiences, beauty, the rapid expansion of the early church, the events surrounding the life and death of Jesus of Nazareth, and our shared longing for purpose and meaning. So, what is it that Christianity doesn't answer as well as your worldview?
Um, okay, there's a lot there. If you want to
Yeah,
comment first, I'll let you go.
yeah. So I mean, the first thing he mentioned was that Christianity accounts well for good and evil, but I'm not really so sure that's the case. I mean, there's kind of the classic problem at play. Like, is it good because God says it's good, or is it good because, God sort of recognizes it as such? If it's the latter, then it seems like that's sort of something we all could figure out on a naturalist view too. Um, like, and if it's the case that it's just whatever God says is good, he could say like murder and rape are good, and they just would be. I expect the response would be, well, he wouldn't because those things are bad. But I mean, that sort of acknowledges the idea that there maybe is a good or bad outside of God. So I'm not so sure it's the case that theism accounts for those things as well as, say, naturalism might, or atheism. That's the first thing I'd say.
Yes, I notice too that you're basically just happy to say that you're a naturalist rather than an atheist. Which I was also going to say. I like he's saying some people want to say atheism isn't a worldview, which fair enough, I guess. I'm happy to
Mhm.
just say that I'm a naturalist, and it's an entailment of that I'm also an atheist. So
Right.
just as we go, I guess I'm just happy to say that like I'm sort of a naturalist first, and atheism just sort of falls out of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think atheism is more just a denial of another worldview than anything.
Let's see. Oh, I was a little bit because he said that he thought Christianity accounted for evil, right? That was like the first thing he said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really get that. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess I just don't. I need to know like what he thinks about the problem of evil. I guess because it seems like a really kind of like classic problem that it doesn't really account very well for evil.
Yeah. And I know like the claim is going to be that it's because he gave his creations, the people who God created, free will. And I guess if you're going to say that, then we're sort of owed an account of what free will amounts to. There's just a lot of explaining that needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot of stuff that he kind of ran through. And it's hard to like I mean, we could sit here for like 10 hours like trying to kind of sit through each thing because there was so much. There was
Yeah.
like beauty, there was free will, morality, and it's like we could camp out on any one of those things for a while, but um I guess I'm not sure what to say other than there's a lot there. And like I would need to hear a lot more about like what he thinks is doing the explanatory work, like on Christianity as opposed to
Yeah.
naturalism. Like I would just need to like hear what the explanation is for why these things are better explained on Christianity rather than naturalism or whatever. Because we can
Yeah.
comment on all of them, but like without I don't know, there was like no argument given really for any of the things that for any of the things like presented. So I don't know. I guess I don't have a lot to say about any of those things in particular.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like if we hone in on like beauty, for instance, is just an example. I guess the claim would probably be what? Something like, well, God thinks certain things are beautiful, and so what humans do too. I don't know if that's correct. Like, what do you think the account would be?
Yeah, I don't know, right? Because I mean, try to think. I don't know, like whatever the account would be. I guess I'm not sure like how it would actually relate to like Christianity being true or even like theism being true. Because I mean, think
Yeah,
like you can be like a naturalist and be like an aesthetic realist, right? I mean, you can just think that like things are just intrinsically beautiful and that's just like the way it is. I don't know. Explanation ends at like
yeah,
the intrinsic, right?
yeah,
Um, so like if you're an aesthetic realist, I mean, you can I don't know, you can do that and be a naturalist.
yeah,
And it's like
exactly.
if you're an aesthetic realist and you think it's tied to theism specifically, I guess I just need to know why. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think, like my explanation of beauty, like is sort of an instrument for survival, reproduction, evolute. I would take an evolutionary approach. Like certain things are beautiful, like nature, for instance. Like if we look out at a beautiful landscape that's green and lush, like we probably find that beautiful because that type of landscape is associated with high resource availability. Like that, I think that seems pretty plausible. But and is doing a lot of explanatory work, probably more than the theist account, but like I can't really comment much more without knowing what that account would be.
Yeah. A couple of other things that he mentioned just off the top of my head that I remember was there's he said it accounted for like the variability and like beliefs within the Christian church. Like it can account for like different denominations like disagreeing with each other, which I also don't really get. That seems like sort of the opposite of what I would expect. Like I don't
Yeah.
know, like if God was giving us like his true kind of word or whatever through the Bible, I don't know. I guess I'd expect it to be like a lot clearer. I guess I wouldn't expect religious disagreement. So I don't know. I didn't really get that one either.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think this is tough because I'd obviously like to answer the question more completely, but I think the question needs a little bit more elaboration in order for us to even do that.
Yeah, I think a quick kind of bullet point response here is in general, I think both of us are going to think that naturalism does a good enough job of explaining all the relevant data, such
Hmm.
that we just don't need theist explanations, and so we can cut it out of our ontology, and so that's just sort of what we're going to do.
Right.
And we have to do a lot of work to get there, I guess. But just playing the defense for right now, I don't know. Just there was no like reason given for abandoning our position, so I don't know. Just playing defense a little bit. That's like the bullet point response, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I'll mention that I've heard theists say before is that, we might have a naturalist account of something that's pretty complex. There's like a lot that goes into the explanation, and theirs, just that like God did it or whatever, is more parsimonious. But I think my objection would be that it's an incomplete explanation. There's a lot of unanswered questions in most cases, like how did God do it? Like what does God amount to? Like it's incomplete.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it too earlier with free will. It's like, what does free will amount to? Like that, I think that's a perfectly legitimate question, even on theism. Like,
Right.
the sort of explanation where it's like, free will just sort of like makes sense on theism or something, or like there's this assumption that like God gives you free will, but it's like how, right? Like
Yeah,
explain that. Like I don't quite
right.
without any more detail. It's just I don't know. It seems like it's not explained at all, really.
Right. I agree.
All right, I guess we'll move on then to question two.
Sounds good.
If your definition of atheism is merely that it's a lack of belief in God and you're just waiting to be convinced, but then you speak of him as though he's in some way synonymous with Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, or fairies, doesn't that at least send the message to your listeners that you actually believe that there is no God? After all, these are entities and beings that you likely believe do not exist. And if your response is that you merely lack a belief in Santa Claus and don't actively believe that he does not exist, doesn't that sound a little disingenuous, honestly?
Interesting question. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'll just say that I think this is basically a question for internet atheists. Because what you'll find people that are like agnostic atheists or something.
Yeah.
And you'll find people on the internet that say like, if what you think atheism is just like a lack of belief, then like they'll be like, well, do you think rocks are atheists? And they'll just be like, yep, rocks are atheists. I think that's really stupid. So I'm totally on board here with just saying that, yeah, atheism is a belief that there is no God. I'm perfectly happy to just say that's what atheism is, and that's what I think. I'm
Right.
perfectly happy to say that like agnostic atheism or whatever like doesn't make any sense really. So yeah, I mean, if you want to sort of push back on that a little bit, feel free. But yeah, I'm perfectly happy to just sort of go where he wants to go here.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I have a certain set of beliefs about the world, like things that I find to be true, and I don't find the theist account of God's existence to be convincing. And so I don't really get this question, honestly. Like I just don't think God, yeah, I don't think God exists. Like, so I guess you're probably right. This question might not be aimed at us.
Yeah, I think it's mostly aimed for like internet, kind of like Reddit atheism or whatever. So yeah, I think we'll just
Yeah.
perfectly happy to say that sure, atheism is a belief that there is no God, and that's what we both think. And I guess move on to question three.
Yeah.
When atheism becomes a part of someone's worldview, they typically change their positions on other issues like abortion, sexual morality, and a number of other things. I actually have several videos of well known atheists saying that there's nothing wrong with prostitution, that they hope their children don't save themselves until marriage, and that sex workers should be put up on a pedestal no different than the military. I didn't use those here because I didn't want to seem combative to individuals, specifically the individuals who made those statements. But even if you didn't become an atheist just so you could sin, and I believe you, do you at least understand why those moves could send that message to people who might say that to you?
Um, hmm.
Wait, so what was the last part of that question again? I was already thinking about what he'd said and kind of zoned out.
The individuals who made those statements, that they hope their children don't save themselves until marriage, and that sex workers should be put up on a pedestal no different than the military. I didn't use those here because I didn't want to seem combative to individuals, specifically the individuals who made those statements. But even if you didn't become an atheist just so you could sin, and I believe you, do you at least understand why those moves could send that message to people who might say that to you?
Yeah, so there's two parts there. I'll let you just comment first, I think, on whatever you want.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can fathom it. Like I can understand why someone might think like I just want to be bad, like in sort of a moral sense, and so I'm gonna deny God just because I sort of want. I get that, and like maybe such people exist. I am not one of those people, and I don't know, like I think if we're gonna say that something is wrong, we're owed an account of why it's wrong. Like you my account of morality, Luke. You know I'm a moral realist, and I think it's grounded in phenomenal experience. Like people can have realist accounts of morality without being theists. Um, and I would just say that things are wrong instrumentally, not intrinsically. So X is wrong because of Y, not X is wrong in and of itself. So I think if someone's going to claim that prostitution is okay or good, you know, on my view, we're owed an account of why that's the case. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's gonna be like moral disagreement, even without, the presence of a God that can sort of ground everything. I don't really know exactly what I'm trying to say here. Do you want to give any input?
Yeah. So here's, I guess, what I was thinking. So part one is like, um, how have your views changed since becoming an atheist, right? That was part one. I don't really know what to say about that because my views, I don't know, like most of what I think really is not informed very much by my atheism. Um, like I don't know if I became a Christian tomorrow, like what else would change? Like nothing, right? Like my political views would still be what they are. Like I wouldn't change my mind about my position on abortion or anything. Like I wouldn't change, my sort of tolerant attitude about like LGBTQ stuff. Um, I don't know. Like it just seems to me like my views are sort of divorced from the sort of religious questions. So I mean, as far as part one goes, I guess I'm not really sure what to say other than I don't know. It just seems like different sorts of spheres to me. The second part though, I guess he's asking like he has these well-known atheists that are saying these things. Um, yeah, I don't know. Without any more context, I guess I'm not sure what to say about the second part really, because it's like I want to know why they're saying those things. Like to the extent that they say, they're okay with sex work or whatever. I don't know. Like maybe they have good reasons for that, right? I don't know. I need to hear more about that. Like it just doesn't even seem obvious to me that like the people that are saying those things are like doing it to be bad or whatever. So the question, like, do you understand how, it might sort of seem to us Christians or whatever that these people are like, they just want to be bad. Like when they say these things, it just sort of sends this signal. Do you understand that? Not
Yeah.
really. I'm not really, no,
Yeah, I think that's what I was kind of trying to get at without like fully putting my finger on it. Like it seemed like he sort of smuggled in that there are intrinsically morally wrong things. And I just don't think that's the case. I think moral wrongs are instrumental. So yeah, I'd want to hear what someone has to say who thinks sex work is fine or whatever. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's basically what I'm trying to say. Yeah, is like
yeah,
he's just got like I don't know. It seems like he thinks that it's like obvious or something that like sex work is wrong, and so like when atheists say this, it's like obviously like insane. But I don't know. I don't think it's obviously wrong or insane or anything. So when people say that, no, it doesn't really signal
yeah.
anything to me.
And like to be clear, I think it could be wrong. I would just need to hear why.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of agnostic on it as well. It's not something that I have a strong position on. It's just not like obvious to me that it's wrong. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't see that any particular signal is being sent as far as like, oh, we're just being atheists to be bad or whatever. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really see it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. My first comments on that might have seemed a little disorganized, but I think we've kind of wrapped it up cleanly here.
All right, we'll move on to four.
If it's a lack of belief sort of atheism, what is it? Is it 50-50, 60-40, 75-25? And at what point do you feel disingenuous saying that you merely lack a belief as opposed to leaning towards, I believe that God does not exist?
Um, that seems a lot like question two to me.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like he's kind of wondering about like what it even means to believe that something is true. And like, I guess I can't say with 100% certainty that there is definitely no God, but like in the same way that I can't say with 100% certainty that we don't live in a simulation, or like that there isn't a floating unicorn a billion miles away. Like, I'm, I can't put my finger on exactly what the percentage might be, but you know, there are just certain things that are so highly probable to be true or not true that we just sort of say we know them to be true or not true. Like, do I believe the tree outside my window exists? Yes, I do. Am I 100% certain it does? Like maybe my senses are mistaken, but probably not because evolution shaped them to likely track the actual physical world. Um, so I think, a belief is such insofar as like we're reasonably certain. So I guess that's what I'd say. Like I am reasonably certain enough that I'm willing to say I don't believe God exists.
Yeah, I think that's basically what I want to say as well. I guess there's a question of like, it's like at what point are you happy to say you're an atheist rather than like an agnostic, I guess is like part of what he's asking too.
Yeah,
And I don't really know. Like
it's
the kind
fuzzy.
of like credence level there was placed in terms of like percentages. I don't really know what that looks like. Like to be an agnostic, do you have to be like 50-50 or like is 51-49 like atheism now? Like I don't really know, right? But um
Yeah.
yeah, setting that aside, right? Because that's kind of weird. Like my credence level is exactly the same as yours, where it's like, yeah, I'm confident enough. I have a belief, right, that I'm fairly confident in that like there is no God. So yeah, I'm an atheist.
Yeah. So I guess ultimately it is a little fuzzy, but you know, I think that's fine.
Now, I know we've all got our talking points, but I want you to struggle to be as sincere with yourself as you can right now. Doesn't it bother you a little bit that when we come to talk about the origins of the universe, and if there's a multiverse, the origin of that too, that the only real options you've got besides God is a past infinite universe, which is impossible, or the universe coming to exist
Mm.
uncaused out of nothing, or something far less clear than even those? It seems that for any worldview that includes atheism, there's a massive blind spot when it comes to the origin of the universe. And all the attempts to try and circumvent that problem seem desperate and at least far less likely than theism. My question isn't just what do you typically say about this, because I'm well aware of the responses. My question is simply this: when you step away from the debate mode that it's so easy for us all to get into online, doesn't this issue destabilize you a little bit? It seems to fit really poorly with any worldview that includes atheism.
Yeah, so right off the bat, I want to say it seems like this guy's probably dealt with a lot of really annoying atheists. He's like preempting a lot of stuff, like get out of your debate mode or whatever. So that's kind of unfortunate, but
Um, yeah, I mean, did you want to comment on anything he said? Because I've got some stuff to say
yeah,
about it, but
yeah, I can comment.
yeah.
So I mean, first of all, this is like one of the most like thought-provoking objections that's like that I've spent the most time on working through. I'll acknowledge that first, but I don't think it works for a few reasons. First of all, I'm actually agnostic about whether the universe is like infinitely extending backwards or forwards versus whether it began. I don't really see why like we can be definitely sure that it's impossible, as he said, that the universe extends infinitely backward, but that aside, this idea that the universe, if it emerged from nothing, it must have been caused. I'm not so sure that's the case either. As I understand it, causation as we know it is sort of inherently temporal. Like this causes that, and it's sort of like sequential. And we also understand time to be a property of the universe. So, if there was nothing before the universe, like not even time, I think asking what came before or like what caused it is sort of a meaningless question, analogous to saying like what's north of the North Pole, if that makes sense. Like I don't think the universe necessarily needs a cause before time existed. Like it can have began without needing a cause.
So let me try and paint the picture that I guess I want to paint, and we'll see if it's like sort of what you're thinking too. So,
Yeah.
um, first of all, he does say, yeah, that it's impossible that it extends infinitely into the past, which I don't know why we're supposed to think that. It's just asserted.
Mhm.
So as far as it goes, yeah, I'm just going to say I'm agnostic about that. I don't see any reason like a priori to rule that out.
Yeah.
But let's just say that it is finite, just for the sake of argument, right? It does not, in fact, extend infinitely into the past. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, that doesn't mean that I'm committed to thinking that it came out of nothing, right? Like there's this kind of like image where like I don't know, there's like literally nothing and then like the Big Bang happens or something. Like I don't think I'm committed to that. Um, like in exactly the same way, right, that theists think that like, like it wouldn't make any sense for me to be like, oh, well, do you think that, how can you believe that God came out of nothing? Like they don't think that, right? Um,
Yeah,
so in exactly the same way, I don't think that the universe came out of nothing. I think that at least one possible picture here is something like, there's just finite, there's like a finite set of moments of time or whatever. But as long as the universe exists in all those moments of time, then it's always been the case that the universe has always existed, right? Like even if it's
right,
finite, like it's always been there. It's never not existed. So I don't see what the
right.
problem is.
Right. I think we're expressing pretty much the same opinion here, which is, yeah, like the universe may have began and also always existed. And I think you noted on another thing too, which is like the question of where did God come from if he created the universe? And that, of course, invites the infinite regress. But I think the response there would be, you know, we sort of need something that need not be caused to cause the universe. Like God just is. But again, it's like there's just a lot of explanation lacking here. Like, why should we believe that?
Well, yeah, I mean, um, you can think that like you need an explanation for like contingent things, I guess, in terms of a necessary thing. So like maybe you think, if you're a naturalist, you're kind of stuck with like this kind of brute fact kind of contingency about like the universe's existence, right? And so
Mhm.
you're going to say, oh, well, I have this kind of necessary foundation in God. He's a necessarily existent thing. And then, yeah, you're right. I think there's a perfectly legitimate question as to like why we're supposed to accept that he's metaphysically necessary. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't see any particular reason to accept that.
Yeah.
But then it's like even if you want to do that kind of work, right? You want to explain contingent things in terms of like a necessary thing. You can be a naturalist and think that the universe has, um, like a necessary origin. So I don't know, like that's what Graham Oppy thinks, right? Oppy thinks like, the initial conditions of the universe are going to turn out to be necessary because like chances haven't played out yet. And like for him, right, like possible worlds are explained in terms of like the actual world and then like where chances play out differently, those are possible worlds. But if you have initial conditions, they're going to be necessary because all possible worlds are going to go back to that actual initial condition, whatever they are. And chances haven't played out yet, so it's going to fall out that that's like a necessary sort of thing. um,
Yeah.
and I'm not like a philosopher of physics, but there's like, I don't know. I think there's ideas that like there can be like a necessary like wave function or something. I'm not a philosopher of physics, so I
I
really
know what
don't
you're talking
comment
about.
too much on that. But yeah, there's
But,
like,
but by that, are you referring to the idea that like the Big Bang, like the wave function, it can sort of collapse, expand back and forth? Or what are you referring to?
so that's something that I actually don't really know. I think the salient point here is just that like I'm not a philosopher of physics, and so when I say like some of them think there's like a necessary wave function, I don't really know what that means. But the salient point
Yeah,
is like it's an option on the table that can do
right.
this kind of like it's like it's a kind of necessary explanation that naturalists can get behind. And as long as it's like a serious option on the table, it's just like even if you want this kind of necessary foundation thing, like you can just do that and be a naturalist still.
Yeah, and importantly, those sort of natural necessities, like the initial conditions of the universe, like that's sort of like that's like you say, on the level of this appeal to like God as a necessity, but God is sort of an extra step. Um, so I think on the principle of parsimony, I'd still lean towards, sort of naturalist necessity claims, especially because we wouldn't even know like what constitutes a being like God. We have really no background knowledge about something that's supernatural. Um, so yeah, I all in all, like I said, this is one of the more thought-provoking objections that I've considered in regards to theism. So, but yeah, ultimately don't think it works.
All right.
Of the arguments for God's existence, is there one that to you seems more interesting than the rest? Is there one that for you actually does weigh in favor of theism? Which one?
Huh. Yeah, interesting, because I would say that last one is one of them that, like I just said, Another one would be the fine-tuning argument. That one, I would say I had to think about quite a bit. How about you?
Um, yeah, I think I'm basically in agreement. So there's two questions here. Like, do I think there's any argument that actually weighs in favor of theism? No, not really. But do I think that there are arguments that are better than others? Yeah, definitely. So, like, which one is the
Yeah,
best one? Yeah, I'm with you. Like fine tuning. Probably, contingency and cosmological arguments, right? Those have been around forever.
yeah,
And for good reason, probably, right? So do I think that like any of them ultimately sort of weigh in favor of theism? No, but like, do I think they're like worthless like arguments that like do nothing? Like, no, I don't think that. I definitely think that they're like arguments that you should think about for sure. And I think that yeah, I'm with you. Fine tuning contingency arguments probably are up there for me.
yeah, yeah, totally agreed.
Most atheists I've met humbly admit that they don't think they can have absolute certainty about much of anything. But what they want from the Christian is a demonstration that God exists or that Christianity is true. Well, when we offer the reasons to believe that we do have, those are typically deemed not good enough. So, what sort of evidence, if any, would be enough to convince you? Do you know? And since it's often a conversation stopper, let's take experimental reproducibility off the table, since that's not even always necessary for science.
Hmm. I might let you go first here.
Um, So reproducibility, I don't know what he means by experimental reproducibility exactly, but reproducibility, I mean, is something that would definitely convince me probably. So I mean, imagine that I could walk into like a Christian church or whatever, and like, I could go into like a Catholic service or whatever, I don't know. And the priests at all of these churches can repeatedly turn water into wine, right? And we get the scientists on it, and they're like, yeah, we don't know what's going on here. As far as we can tell, they're just like breaking the laws of nature repeatedly, and it's only the Christian priests who can do this. Um, I don't I don't know what to say about that, right? I mean, that seems like pretty good evidence that something is going on, and I mean, the fact that it's only occurring in like Christian churches or whatever, I don't know. That seems like pretty good evidence that, it's maybe not evidence that Christianity is like definitely true, but like it's definitely evidence in its favor for sure, right? So that sort of thing would like would it convince me? Um, that's really hard to say, right? I don't know because I'm not in that position, so that's really hard to say. But like I would definitely think that's really strong evidence in favor, right? But then he says let's take reproducibility off the table. um, I don't know. That just seems a little bit like cheating. I don't know. Like, absent reproducibility, is there anything that would convince me? I don't know, like philosophical arguments, I guess, if they were like sufficiently strong. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna try not to be like long-winded here, but when I'm trying to explain something, it's sort of based on just like there's usually like a set of explanations that might explain what's going on. And I try to just determine like what's the most plausible based on like prior probability, Um, and so in the case of, turning water to wine and scientists say they have no idea what happened, it appears as if they just broke the laws of nature. Um, I might still not even be convinced that that's what's happening because the prior probability of something like that is essentially zero. Like we've never seen anything like that. What we have seen are things that appear to be unexplainable that are later explained. So I would lean towards something more along those lines. Like maybe we just don't have the scientific faculties to understand what's happening. Um, I definitely agree that it is a point in Christianity's favor if something like that happened, but I don't know if I'd be convinced. Um, and in terms of what would convince me, man, I might have to die and see God himself, man. I don't know.
Yeah. Um, a thought too is like the evidence is always going to have to be considered on a whole kind of basis too. So like when I say I'm not sure if I'd be convinced by what seemed like, I think if you're a Christian, right, and you're listening to like what I'm saying, and it's like, oh, he wouldn't be convinced by water being turned to wine by like Christian priests, like that's insane, right? But I mean, we have to consider the evidence base as a whole too. So it's like, even though I would say, yeah, that's definitely evidence in favor of Christianity, like a lot, you have to consider too, like pieces of evidence that seem, disconfirmatory of Christianity, like the problem of evil
Right.
or like the problem of like horrendous animal suffering or whatever. Um, so yeah, I don't know, just like clarifying, I guess, like, even if we had pieces of evidence in favor of Christianity, like the evidence base as a whole still might count against it. And that's where it's like, I really don't know what I would think because the kinds of really strong pieces of evidence that I'd have to think about really hard if they existed don't exist. And so it's really hard for me to know what I would actually think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, the reproducibility thing is interesting. He says it's not like always necessary for science, and like I guess to an extent, like to the extent that yeah, a study could be done that appears methodologically sound and produces, what look to be like reliable results, but the point of reproducibility is like to kind of make sure that that's the case. Like if more people perform that same study, would they find the same results? And if they don't, that might suggest that there was something weird going on in the methodology of that study, something like that. So I don't know if his this like setting rely reproducibility aside is something we should really be doing. Like is that kind of echoing what you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, like consider that you just have like a one-off study, right? And it finds, result X, whatever that is, right?
Mhm.
Um, is that like kind of prima facie evidence of whatever that study finds? Like, yeah, sure, but like, would I consider that like really like strong evidence? Like, not really, right? And that's like the whole point with like the reproducibility crisis, right? Is like we have a bunch of experiments that were like sort of one off, and it's like, okay, I guess this is what we have, but then they never, or like when they try to replicate them, the results don't hold, right? So
Yeah.
it turns out that like the initial evidence you had like is kind of weak without reproducibility, right? So and like obviously like that's a sort of generalization, right? Like maybe there are like one-off studies that are like iron tight. I don't know. But like just as a general sort of rule, right? It's going to be like pretty weak kind of evidence. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, reproducibility helps, I think.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, man, I that's a tough question to answer. Um, and I have thought about it, not like super deeply. But yeah, that's what I've got for now.
All right.
To what extent did social and moral issues start you down the path toward your atheism? That is to say, the typical Christian or religious views on sexuality, gender, rights, and acts and commands of God in the Old Testament. It seems that many deconversion stories online begin with, or at least include, LGBT issues, purity culture, or hell as instrumental in the deconversion process. It strikes me that what should matter most is the truth and not what we might prefer that the truth were. I honestly wonder how much those issues and ones like them motivate the deconversion rather than all this talk about evidence.
Um, I want to tackle that one first. So there, it seems like like this talk about evidence makes perfect sense in these deconversion stories if you're thinking something like this, right? You're thinking Christianity commits you to the claim that being gay is wrong and sinful, right? Now, maybe that's debatable, right? Maybe that's not actually true, but suppose that that's something that you think is true when you're deconverting, right? You think that okay, I'm supposed to be committed to this thing if Christianity is true, um, and it turns out that that thing is not true, right? It turns out that you have like very good reasons to think that actually being gay is like perfectly fine. It's not sinful. It's not wrong. And so if Christianity is, it's sort of an entailment of Christianity that like being gay is wrong and sinful or whatever, and it turns out that that's false, then it makes perfect sense to deconvert for that reason, right? Like that still seems like part of your evidence base. Now, again, you can argue about, whether or not Christianity commits you to that thing, but I mean, I don't know, it makes perfect sense, I think. Still doing like the evidence thing, right? It still makes perfect sense in these deconversion stories, it seems to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I would say in terms of my deconversion, it's sort of a typical story. Like there were just things that seemed to sort of contradict themselves, like in the Bible. When I would ask questions, it would bottom out in something like it's not about sort of earthly reasoning, it's about just faith, which I mean, when we really think about it, maybe this is not being charitable enough, but to me that amounts to believing it because you want to believe it, which to me isn't a reason to believe it. Just sort of like typical skepticism about the logic behind, the belief system that sort of led me to think more deeply and consider things like, I don't know what the label is, but what is it good because God says it is, that problem, like the problem with evil, all this stuff that sort of seems to work against God's existence. Yeah, I don't really know. It's a pretty typical story, I would say, for me.
Um, yeah, so I guess I'm not really sure what to say about that. I mean, I was like, I got off the train pretty early, right? So the stuff about like, oh well, how did social and moral issues affect your deconversion? Like they didn't, you know?
Yeah,
Um, so I don't have anything to say like personally about like how that affected me. It just like didn't, like I said earlier too, like these are just like different things to me. Like even if I converted tomorrow, like I would still like hold my views about like being tolerant towards LGBTQ stuff or whatever, right? Like none of that's going to change. So I don't know. It's just like different things to me. I guess I don't really have anything to
yeah,
say about it, but yeah, like personally, I do want to say what I said earlier though about like the people that do go through deconversions for those reasons. I don't think they're like being irrational or whatever. And
yeah.
maybe he's not saying they are, but I sort of got the sense that like he thinks they're being irrational or something when they do that. But again, it's like from their perspective, I think what they do is like it makes perfect sense, right? Like if you think that like, oh, Christianity entails this, but this thing is false, so you know, um, Christianity must be false. Like I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I don't know. He might be kind of slipping back into like there just are sort of intrinsically morally wrong things. Like it seems like the content of that question might be similar to what he asked before about like, did you just want to do bad or something? Uh, I don't know. Maybe that's not being charitable again, but
Yeah, I think we'll just move on then.
yeah.
Can you name the last three academic books you read by theists on the subject? How long ago did you read them? Or is most of your understanding of apologetics and atheism from non scholarly internet sources, pop level books, and let's face it, YouTube videos? And be honest with yourself about this. Anyone can Google up a list of books and paste them in the comments section. But I want to know, are you getting the best from the other side?
So the question is, have you heard like the most relevant arguments, basically?
Um, yeah, more or less. I mean, he asks specifically like if you read the academic work. But yeah, I mean, I think generally the question is just going to be, yeah, have you heard the best from the other side is what he asked. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not like a philosopher or anything. I'm, sort of a hobby level philosophy, like philosophical person, but I think I've heard, the most convincing arguments, to my best understanding anyway.
Yeah. So I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm not doing this professionally, but I mean, I definitely keep up with like philosophy of religion stuff. So I mean, I've definitely listened to people like I don't know, Josh Rasmussen or William Lane Craig or what's his name, Alexander Bruce, Rob Coons. I have definitely like as far as I know, like listened to everything that they have on YouTube, and I've read some of their articles and stuff, even if maybe not like book length stuff. And I've definitely engaged with like a lot of people who engage with them. So, like Joe Schmidt has the Majesty of Reason channel, or I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm happy to just say that like yeah, I'm not like an academic, so I don't read like every book that comes out on philosophy of religion, but like yeah, I'm definitely doing what I can as a non-professional to engage with like the things that, serious people have to say.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think he should be careful about, saying that YouTube videos aren't reliable. I mean, what is he doing right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're listening to like if you're watching like a William Lane Craig YouTube video or whatever, I'm assuming that that's like still what William Lane Craig actually thinks. Like,
Yeah,
um, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think I agree with you there that like as long as you're like listening to serious people, is like even if it's on YouTube, like so what?
yeah,
I'm assuming it just means like low level YouTube videos though. I don't know, which like fair
right.
enough. Like if what you're doing is engaging with like who's the guy with like the banana, right? Like the banana guy who thinks that like bananas prove God or whatever because like they're so perfect for your hand or whatever. Like if you're engaging with that, like okay, I get what he's saying.
Right. Or like the YouTube shorts that you mentioned at the start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, all right.
Let's finish with a pretty common one. If you found out today to your satisfaction that Christianity were true, would you accept God's authority, repent of your sins, and trust Jesus as your king?
Um I don't know, that just seems to be like I don't know, that's a weird question, right? I mean, does it seem to you like he's just like if you thought that Christianity would true were true, right? Would you do the things that you're supposed to do if Christianity is true? It's like I guess, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. That is an interesting question. I guess I would sort of have to, in a way.
I don't know. I mean, like,
But like,
consider an analogous question, right? Like, if you thought that like Hinduism were true or whatever, like, would you, or like Buddhism, right? Like, if you thought that Buddhism were true, would you like do the things that you're supposed to do to like reach nirvana or whatever, right? Like, I I guess, right? I don't know. I guess.
yeah, I guess like any of these different sort of interpretations of, of God and worship could ask the exact same question. They could even ask it to each other. Like, if it were true, would you do what follows? Sure.
Yeah, and it's
But
like,
I I think there would still be questions, right? Like if the Christian God as they describe him is true, like if that conception of God actually exists, I think there are still like serious questions that need to be answered. Like, is he omnipotent? Is he morally perfect? You know?
yeah, I guess I'm thinking like, what does it mean to accept his authority? Like, I don't know. I guess I think that the question is sort of vague, right? Like, I guess I don't know what that amounts to. Like, what does it mean to accept his authority? Like, is like surely that doesn't just mean accepting his existence, right? Because then the question is like, if you thought he exists, would you accept that he exists? It's like, I guess, right? So it must
Yeah.
mean something more than that, but I don't know what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I guess if I'm saying that we're granting the Christian God as he is understood exists, then I actually am saying that he is omnipotent and morally perfect because that's how they understand him. But I guess what that would probably amount to is that whatever God says goes, like that's just what makes something morally good. And like to that extent, yeah, I would have to follow that authority. Like
Yeah. Yeah,
maybe to the extent,
I think I'm with you here. Like part of it's going to depend on like just what you even think Christianity amounts to, right? Because I mean, suppose that you think Christianity just amounts to like Jesus resurrecting from the dead because he's the son of God, right?
Mhm.
Suppose you think that's like the one thing you need to believe to be a Christian. That leaves open the possibility that, you can be like an anti-realist about morality or that, you might think that God is like contingent or like a God of limited power, right? Like Philip Goff like literally thinks that. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, it's just going to depend on what you even think Christianity amounts to.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just so many different interpretations. Like, yeah, yeah, we need to know more of, the his account of Christianity, I guess.
Um, all right. How long did that take?
Um, I don't know.
Not too terribly long. When did we start? Like four, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah, probably about an hour long video here.
All right. So I think there's 15 more of these then. This one's from 2021, if you're ready.
Are these are going to be different ones?
Yeah, it's the same guy, but they're different questions. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Or do you, Yeah, I guess while we're here, let's do it.
Last year, I made a video, 10 Questions for Atheists. That's in a playlist that has 12 episodes as I listened to what atheists said and then interacted with that. There were a lot of responses, and I still get responses to this day from that video. Now, admittedly, there were some things in that video that might have been tongue in cheek, but I genuinely wanted to hear the answers to those questions. Quite a few atheists seemed to appreciate that I was trying to understand their positions in a greater way, but many still didn't think my questions were genuine. A lot of people also thought that I was too wordy for the question to come out in a precise way. So here I'm asking these questions as simply and concisely as I possibly can and without any snark whatsoever. I genuinely want to know the answers to these questions. Question
Yeah, all right, we'll decide.
one.
All
If you
right.
have a deconversion story from any world religion, would you mind sharing that story? If you grew up in a non religious household, what was it like to experience being around other people who were raised religious? Question number two.
I don't really have a lot to say about that one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can just mention that I grew up a Lutheran with a Lutheran dad, but an agnostic mom. Already kind of described the deconversion process. It's pretty typical. So,
Is there anything that Christian apologists or philosophers bring that you actually do consider to be good evidence for God? And if not, how do you define evidence?
Um, I mean, I can.
seems like
So we already kind of answered that in the first one, right? He kind of already.
right.
This is just like the what's the best argument sort of question. But in terms of like what do I consider evidence? I guess I'll just cast it in like kind of Bayesian terms. I don't know. Like it's like evidence is like what something counts as evidence in favor of one thing if it's like sort of probabilistically like more expected on sort of one theory or whatever compared to a different one. I
Mhm.
don't know. That's one way of cashing it out for now, I guess.
Right. I guess this sort of ties to what he said about like, is there anything that could happen that would convince you? And I'm trying to think like, imagine we go back in time to when like Jesus supposedly, rose from the dead. He was in a sealed tomb. They find that his body's gone. We know that nobody stole it or anything. Like there's not like an apparent reason that we can explain like what happened. Let's say people even saw his spirit, like his body rise up into the sky into heaven. Um, and that sort of thing, like there were scientists present that, you know, maybe they were even in like a box like a mile away, so it couldn't be that they were hallucinating due to some gas or something, and they just said, yeah, that broke the laws of physics. Like that might be a case that convinces me.
All right. You want me to just go on to the next one at that point?
Oh, you got nothing to say about that?
No, not really. No, actually.
Okay. I mean, would that convince you?
Um, I really don't know what to say, right? Like, I know what I think about like my actual epistemic position because like I have time to think about it and like the
Hmm.
evidence for whatever I'm thinking about is like actually there. So it's really hard for me to know what I want to say about like imaginary cases like that.
Hmm.
I think what I want to say is the same thing I said before, where it's like, yeah, I would probably like I definitely want to say that's like really strong evidence, at least prima facie, right? I don't know, like maybe there's some
Hmm.
sort of reasons for thinking that actually doesn't really count as good evidence. I mean, I don't know. I'd want to hear what like skeptics say about it, but I mean, definitely at least prima facie, yeah, that's like really compelling evidence
Yeah,
for Christianity or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It's just really hard for me to know what to say about like imaginary cases like that.
yeah. Another way of framing, the rising of Jesus's, body up into the heavens that Alex O'Connor framed it as, like, in order to get an answer out of Jordan Peterson, I remember was like, um, he was trying to get him to answer the question, "Do you believe that happened?" And he said, if there were a camera pointed at the tomb and it recorded that that's what happened, do you expect that the camera recorded Jesus rising up into the heavens? And Jordan Peterson said yes, but that's besides the point. Like, I don't know, that might be compelling evidence too. But yeah, it does go back to what we were talking about before. Like there are other plausible explanations, like the camera got hacked or something, like presuming that there are hackers in a world where, you know, there's a camera. But
I don't know, I mean, just like rule all of that out, right? I mean, something that
yeah,
I'm kind of worried about here is like something happened, right? But it's like it's not clear that like the explanation for that is actually going to end up being like Christianity exactly. Like I
yeah.
don't know. Consider that like there's this kind of like evil God hypothesis, right?
Hmm.
And maybe evil God has actually has like tricked us all into believing that Jesus rose from the dead to make us all believe in Christianity because it makes him really happy to, make us believe in this false religion because that's just like evil. And he's like, he's evil, so that's what he does, right? It's like so conniving and wicked of him to deceive us all about this thing. So it's like maybe it's really good evidence for evil God, right? Like I don't know, right? I don't know like
Yeah.
what to think really.
Yeah, I mean that is a good point. Like if we rule out all sort of naturalistic explanations, like and we grant, okay, we're going into the realm of the supernatural. That sort of seems to open up perhaps even an infinite number of possible explanations. Like how do we zero in on Christianity in that case? Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah. So
But
yeah, that's yeah, I think what I'm trying to get at is like I don't know what to say about these cases because I like what I don't know. I don't know what to say because of like yeah, there's just going to be so many things that you could offer as an explanation. Trying to like sort through it is just going to be like a nightmare.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I said before I hadn't really deeply thought about like what evidence, if any, could convince me. So this was sort of me trying to think more deeply about it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It might have to be I die and see God. But anyway,
Straightforwardly, I'm a dog person. Here's my dog, Indiana. Dogs, cats, both, or neither. Did
Wait, does he
Jesus exist as a single historical?
put a different is he those are different questions, right? That's not the
wait. I think he's just trying to be relatable, and I'll say cats.
um I guess I don't have a preference either way. I don't know. They're both fine. I don't know. Cats, dogs,
Yeah.
animals are just cool. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I like dogs too, to be clear. I just prefer cats.
Individual? And if so, how reasonable do you think it is for people to hold the position that Jesus did not exist? Of your
Oh,
Christian friends and family members,
okay, yeah, he's kind of just going rapid fire. So I
Yeah,
guess the
yeah.
question there is, was there a historical Jesus, basically?
Yeah, I guess, I haven't looked super into it. I do have a book about the historical Jesus. I just haven't read it yet. From my understanding, there's pretty good evidence that he existed. Um, just maybe not in the way that people generally understand him. Um, or like, the characteristics of Jesus are probably broadly misunderstood. But I do think like Jesus as an actual human probably existed. I know there is, a sort of a debate about that, but I'm just not familiar enough with it to comment much more than that.
There's a really interesting article, if anyone's interested, from Stephen Law. I don't remember what it's called. But the basic sort of schema of the argument is like there's these kind of like reasons that like biblical scholars give for thinking that Jesus exists, and then he gives a sort of thought experiment for like doubting whether these criterion are actually very good. um I wish I could remember what it was called so that people could go find it if they want, because it is really interesting. But um without getting too dug down into the weeds there. I guess what I want to say is I don't really know either, just because like I don't know enough. But I'm perfectly happy to say that he existed. I just think it's like of basically zero consequence, really. I don't know. I'm perfectly happy to say he existed. If that's like the minimal kind of claim, just did he exist? Like, sure, okay. I'm perfectly happy to say that.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, th this is sort of an expansion upon the question, but I would also say that I don't, you know, think there's any problem with people like sort of following the supposed teachings of Jesus. I don't know if those teachings are true. I mean, that kind of goes back to the question, but in the same way that someone might follow the teachings of like Gandhi. So just wanted to say that quick.
Which one would stand the best chance of convincing you or persuading you, family members, with people to hold the position that Jesus did not exist? Of your Christian friends and family members, which one would stand the best chance of convincing you or persuading you than the others? Even if you think none of them stand a chance, some stand more of a chance than others, right? Who would that be and why? What's your favorite film or television series? Contingency arguments for God.
Pause.
Man, he's flying. Did he say family and friends?
Yeah, and I don't really have anything to say about that. I don't know. I don't know. I have no opinion about that at all, to be honest.
Uh, yeah, I mean it is he kind of preempted this, but it is true that I don't really think any of them would be able to convince me ultimately, but I don't know. Maybe like is Tate a theist? I mean, obviously none of our viewers are going to know any of these people, so should we just skip this one?
Yeah, I don't have anything to say about it really.
All right.
God's existence can be framed in a number of ways, obviously, but pick one. And what's your favorite response to this sort of contingency argument?
Okay,
But
so
pick one. Contingency arguments for God's existence can be framed in a number of ways, obviously, but pick one. And what's your favorite response to this sort of contingency argument? Or if you're really ambitious, what's your favorite response to contingency arguments in general?
okay. So I guess there's two questions, right? Question one is like, do you have a favorite like version of a contingency argument, or I guess like in the absence of that, or if you think you just have a general response to like all contingency arguments, what is that? I guess that's the two questions.
Yeah, you can go. I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
go
do I have
ahead.
a favorite contingency argument? Like, no. In terms of a general response, I basically just want to say, when we're sort of comparing like the relative sort of explanatory merits here of like contingency and necessity, I just don't see that theism is ever going to do anything that naturalism isn't going to do. Like, suppose that you think the universe is infinitely extending into the past, right? And so you just explain like everything, I guess, in terms of like what happened previously, and you just like do that forever. So,
Mhm.
okay, seems like you don't really need theism. Suppose you think that suppose that you think there's like a sort of contingent foundation, such that like, I don't know, just like the sort of universe we live in just sort of exists as like a brute fact, and like that's all there is to say about it. Um, Compare that with the explanation that God exists as a brute fact, and that's all there is to say about it, right? It seems like the explanatory merits are like the same. Consider, the idea that like God exists as like the necessary sort of explanation for all the contingent things. Okay. Just contrast that with any naturalist explanation that's going to be cashed out in, necessity terms as well, right? It's just not clear that theism is like doing anything that naturalism isn't.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. I think we already kind of addressed that in the last video anyway.
On your understanding of Christianity, what does it take for a person to become a Christian and experience everlasting life?
Yeah, I don't know. That seems more like a question for Christians, to be honest. I don't really have an opinion about that, really.
I don't know, he seems like he's just trying to get at like, do you actually understand Christianity?
So, so let's like, I guess like counterfactually, if I were a Christian, what would I say, right? Okay. Um, I would go with a pretty minimalist kind of version of Christianity, where like to be a Christian, what you think is basically just that like Jesus rose from the dead and is like the Son of God. I think that's like all I would think you'd need to be committed to. Like if I were a Christian, I think
Yeah.
that's what I'd say.
Yeah, and like there are a lot of different views here. Like as a Lutheran, the criteria was, be baptized and then believe in God, and that's all it takes. You're forgiven for everything as long as you believe. Um, so that's what it would have been under my doctrine growing up.
Whether you think anything in the Bible is true or not, do you think that the Bible or any passage in the Bible seems to teach eternal conscious suffering in hell? Maybe you think It teaches universal ultimate salvation or annihilation, the idea that people will no longer be conscious, but will be annihilated and no longer have a conscious experience of anything. And I should say, I'm partly asking that question because a friend of mine, Chris Date at Rethinking Hell, would be happy to have a discussion or a debate on the subject of whether any Bible passage teaches eternal conscious torment. What do you
I have no opinion, so
Yeah, I don't know. These past two questions have sort of both been under the umbrella of do you understand Christianity sort of in and out? And I guess no, like I can't tell you like everything the Bible teaches, but I don't know if the point of bringing those things up is to say, well, if you don't understand it, then how can you reject it? I would say, well, I mean, there are sort of base level things that I do fully understand here. Like, you're claiming that there's sort of an omnipotent deity that's morally perfect, and I can perfectly well wrap my head around that and sort of pick it apart. And it seems like if I deny that God exists, I deny that Christianity is true. And there are specific things that you know, I might have noticed while I was a Christian that seemed to be sort of contradictory within the Bible. I might not be able to remember them at this moment, but it's just been a long time since I've read the Bible. I can just generally tell you that from what I've seen, it seems sort of contradictory. So that's what I'd have to say.
yeah, I think I'm gonna say the same thing you just said, basically. Like to the extent that like I have zero opinion on the question of hell. Um, it's just not like something I'm concerned about. I don't know. Like it's not anything that informs my atheism, right? Like to the extent that your atheism is like informed by, like suppose you think that like Christianity commits you to this doctrine of hell or whatever, and like you think that's like incompatible with a morally perfect God or something. So like Christianity is just like incoherent, right?
Mhm.
To the extent that, your atheism is like informed by that kind of thing, like yeah, okay. I mean, this becomes like a relevant question, but I mean, that's, I don't know. My atheism is not informed by that sort of thing, like at all. So yeah, I don't know. I just
Right.
don't care.
Right, exactly.
do you think is the most dangerous or problematic issue that theologically conservative Christians hold to? And I'm talking about an issue or a position, not a person, a movement, or a party. Well, that's the list for.
Um, okay, so the most like harmful thing that fundamentalists believe, basically.
Hmm. I mean, the thing that pops into my head immediately is just like sort of the hate for broad groups that seems to arise, like LGBTQ. Um, that's like the first thing that comes to mind, but I might have to think about it a little more.
Yeah, that immediately jumps to my mind. The other thing that jumps out to me is like the kind of like the kind of like pseudo science like fundamentalist industry, but like young Earth creationism is like what I have in mind. I think that sort of thing
Mhm.
is like really bad as well.
Yeah,
Or like
yeah. I mean, it does sort of that type of belief sort of allows people to just deny science. Like if that's sort of a core part of their belief system that like, no, we just deny the science here. This is what happened. Then they can do it for other stuff too. Like, the whole COVID crisis might have been that's really speculative, of course, but just like that type of thing.
yeah, so I'm thinking of like Kenneth Copeland, right? Where like he had people come in to like pray away COVID. People definitely died because of that. Like
Oh yeah,
like that's yeah, I definitely think that's really bad.
right. Agreed.
All right, I guess we've got 5 questions from 2025.
All right, cool.
In 2020, I had 10 questions for atheists, and the response was pretty big. I put my reaction to the videos that atheists made in response to it into a playlist on this channel that you can check out. And I still get answers to those questions to this day.
I wonder if like if I like tag him, if he'll like respond to us. That'd be cool.
Hmm. That would be cool. Yeah.
But now, as
Maybe you should.
2025 is upon us,
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I mean, I'm not gonna hold my breath, but I'll tag him. I'll see if anything happens.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got 5 questions for atheists in 2025, given certain events and current debates in the worldview discussion arena. If you're an atheist, I want to know what your answer is to these questions. So let's just jump right in. Question 1. Cameron Bertuzzi over at Capturing Christianity recently caused a lot of controversy by saying he no longer takes atheism seriously.
The reason why I don't take atheism seriously any longer is because even if we accept the atheist's strongest argument, it still wouldn't prove atheism.
We have these really powerful arguments, at least from our perspective, on the theist side, like arguments from fine tuning. But yes, there are arguments on the other side that are meant to show that it's unlikely God exists or that God does not exist, like arguments from evil or divine hiddenness arguments. And so this puts us in an interesting spot. We've got arguments for and against. But as Philip Goff suggested recently, perhaps you have a God of limited power. This would mean you have really powerful arguments from God on the theist side, like the fine-tuning arguments. But then the arguments from evil and divine hiddenness no longer become powerful arguments for atheism. Instead, what they are arguments for a limited God, but not arguments for no God. And so there's no reason to take atheism seriously, someone might decide. So the question is Cameron wrong? And if so, why is he wrong? Question 2.
Yeah, so just so a little bit of background context, just in case you're not familiar. As far as I know, that clip that he played from Cameron was about the problem of evil. Like Cameron's thought, I think, because this was like this was a controversy on like atheist YouTube that people got like really upset about. I think his thought was basically just that like if you accept the problem of evil, it like doesn't like refute theism as a whole. So that's like the kind of background context on what Cameron wants to say there, I guess.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. Like, first of all, I guess I just want to say, like, and maybe this isn't part of what he's getting at, but like, there is this sort of, common objection to like atheist views that you can't disprove God, but I don't think that's the aim. It's just to show that it's highly implausible that he exists. But that being said, with this idea that you can sort of like just say, well, maybe God isn't perfect or like has limited powers. Like at a certain point, I don't really know what the concept, like what is God doing? Like how is he helping like explain the world or, morality in any way? Like it seems like they're sort of starting from a conclusion, like God exists. Now let's sort of work backwards to prove that. Like just sort of ad hoc adding like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's this in the face of, criticism. But my question would be like, why is this concept necessary in the first place? Like, what sort of explanatory work is God actually doing?
Um, yeah, so I guess what I'll say just about like the Cameron Bertuzzi comment is like, if I'm sort of construing his thought correctly, at least, I just think it's mistaken. Like the idea that like, oh, the problem of evil is like not a problem because it doesn't refute theism entirely. It's like, okay, it's not supposed to though. Like, in the same way that, um, I don't know, offering an argument against like anything probably doesn't refute like just like a whole broad family of views. Like I don't know.
Right.
The point of the problem of evil is that it's supposed to be like you have this like conjunction of facts where like God is morally perfect, and also there's like all this horrible like suffering around us. It doesn't seem compatible with like a morally perfect being. To the extent that like you are going to reject the claim that like God is morally perfect, fine, you don't have a problem of evil, but like Christians usually do want to accept that, so it's a problem. So I don't know. It just sort of like misses the point, I think. Like, oh, problem of evil is not a problem because even if you accept it, it doesn't like refute theism entirely. It's like, yeah, I guess, but like that's not what it's trying to do. I don't know. It's just like so about that at least. I just think it's sort of like missing the point.
Yeah, and I don't know, like I was saying, this type of thing can just keep going. Like, let's say a Christian hears an argument that makes them think, oh wait, maybe God didn't create the universe. They can grant that, sure. Like maybe there is a God and he didn't create the universe, but Again, just to reiterate, like, what is the role of God now? Like, what explanatory work is he doing in the world?
Yeah. So, I guess that gets us to like Philip Goff then, right? So like the limited God thing is supposed to be like we have these data points, right? We have this data point of like horrible suffering and what seems to be sort of like extremely gratuitous evil in the world that a morally perfect God wouldn't have any reason to allow. Okay, he thinks that's pretty good evidence against like kind of normal views of like a morally perfect God. Okay, and then he thinks we have this fine tuning evidence, which is like really good evidence in favor of, um, some kind of sort of creative entity, I guess, right? Um, because like it's really hard for naturalists to explain. So like the idea here is just that he thinks he's getting a lot of explanatory work done, right, by this kind of limited God hypothesis. The idea being that like he's not omnipotent, so he can't stop all the evil, but like he's powerful enough to create the universe and like fine tune it. So there we go, problem solved, right? That's the idea. So I guess I'm worried about a couple of things. One, it sort of seems like the hypothesis is like gerrymandered a little bit. I mean, consider like the amount of atoms in the universe or something, and then you're sitting around wondering from the armchair why there's that many atoms rather than like one more or one less or two more or two less or whatever, right? And I say, well, God wanted there to be exactly that number of atoms, right? It doesn't really strike you, I don't think, right, as like a legitimate explanation. Like something feels a little bit gerrymandered when I say that, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my next question would be, why did he want that specific amount? And I don't know, what would the response be? Like, because that's the amount necessary for life?
Well, I mean, that couldn't be right though, right? Because like, I mean, surely life could arise with like one less atom or whatever, right? I mean, that can't be right. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I'm definitely worried about this. I don't know what the issue is exactly. Like when I say it's gerrymandered, like that's not a very technical sort of way of putting it. Like I don't know how to put this in like Bayesian terms. Like is like the prior probability going down because we're like just adding extra stuff to our hypothesis? Like I don't really know what I'm like I don't know the technical way of like putting this worry, but like something is a little bit strange here.
Yeah, I don't
But
know. It might kind of tie back to brute facts again. Like, if you ask, why did God want that many atoms? You might just say he just did. It's a brute fact. But I mean, can't we just say it's a brute fact that there are that many atoms? Or am I misunderstanding something?
yeah, so I think that's like right. Like I definitely would ask the same question. Like it's not clear that like any explanatory work is getting done on the theistic picture there, but
Hmm.
um yeah, the other thing that like the other part of what I'm worried about here is there is kind of like a weird tension here where like how like the idea is supposed to be that like a god of limited power explains this stuff, but I'm not sure it really does a very good job actually. Like think about the configuration of God where or if you think that like God by definition is all powerful or whatever, I don't know, just consider this entity, right? Where he's like sufficiently powerful to create the universe, but like um, also, like he is apparently too weak to like fix some of the evil. Like that's just I don't know, really like implausible on its face. Again, like I don't know how to
Yeah.
put this like in technical terms, right? Like I don't know how to like probabilistically like make this point, but um like how can it possibly be that like there's this entity that's powerful enough to create the universe and fine tune the constants for life, but like also he has to do that in such a way like he's apparently like limited to the extent that he can't like stop like hundreds of thousands of years like pointless animal suffering. Like he's so powerful that he just like creates universes, but like he can't like shave off a couple thousand years of animal suffering. Like I don't know, that's really weird.
Yeah, I don't know. And like, presumably he made suffering as a concept, right? If he made the universe. So like, I don't know. Yeah, it seems really weird. Like, he's perfectly capable of making these extremely complex systems that need not involve like good and evil or whatever. But then it stops at good and evil for some reason.
Yeah, I think it's in a really awkward position.
Yeah.
The other thing too is like the whole point of this hypothesis is like it's supposed to do explaining for fine tuning and it's supposed to do explaining for evil.
Hmm.
The sort of thing that I want to say too, though, is like a naturalist, right? Is like I think that naturalists can explain fine tuning just fine. There's not any actual like problem here, and maybe I should say more about that. But the general point is just going to be that to the extent that I don't think that fine tuning is like actually like an evidential problem for naturalism, I'm just not concerned about it, right? So
Yeah.
I'm perfectly like as long as I can explain everything I need to explain, um, I just don't need to introduce this limited God hypothesis, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think, you know, the sort of need to introduce such a god just sort of stems from an intuition. Like it really seems like everything is just so like perfectly tuned for there must be a creative entity, and I mean that's really just to me an intuition more than anything. Like you say, we can explain why such, you know, fine-tuned systems exist on a naturalistic account. And yeah, I don't know if we should dive like fully into fine-tuning unless he explicitly brings it up, but we could.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's worth saying something because I mean, it is doing a lot of work here in like this limited God thing. Like the point is that, we seem to have these constants of nature that are extremely finely tuned, that are, at least sort of prima facie extremely implausible on naturalism. So the point of like the limited God hypothesis is to do the explanatory work, right? Why do we have these like fine-tuned constants? Well, it's because there was this creative entity that was there to fine tune them. So now there's not a problem, right? The kind of constants being what they are is no longer implausible. So that's like how it's supposed to work, right? It's supposed to do like explanatory work. So because it's such a big part of it, maybe we should say a little bit about fine tuning. So I'll let you have a crack at it first if you want.
Uh, you know, you might be better at just like describing what the position actually is before like in its full to its full extent.
Sure. So the basic kind of structure is going to be we have these what seem to be really finely tuned constants in like physics. So common examples are like if you changed like the gravitational force in our universe a little bit, then like if you change it a little bit, like everything collapses, and like you can't get like anything really. Or if you change like this force or that force or whatever in the initial conditions, and like basically you just get like a universe with nothing in it. And so the constants seem to be like kind of finely tuned, right? So that we have the kind of universe that we have, which supports I'm just going to say life. I think like if you read fine tuning literature, what they're actually concerned with is morally embodied agents, I think is the term. I don't know, it's something like that. But life will do just fine for our purposes here. But the point is just going to be that like there's something sort of striking about like the universe we live in, that it supports life, and the way that it does that is like with these what seem to be extremely fine-tuned constants in nature, such that like if you sort of adjusted them a little bit, you just don't get a life-supporting universe. So we need an explanation for that, and so that's where this kind of like God is there to fine-tune the constants is like supposed to do explanatory work.
Yeah, so I guess a few things I'd say here. First of all, you know, what we know about life is that it requires, you know, X, Y, and Z atoms, you know, in abundance and in certain configurations. Um, but I don't know if it's actually clear that that's the only path to life. Like maybe there's a different configuration of the universe in which life could arise given enough time and, you know, certain events occurring. I don't think that's a certainty at all. And, you know, that's even something that's reflected, you know, within our current universe, like in astrobiology, they grant the possibility that maybe a form of life that sort of is configured differently than how we know it to be could be out there. So that's the first thing I'd say. But then second of all, um, I- just to sort of set this up, I don't think anyone would, you know, even this person here would probably grant that we can perfectly well explain how like the first single-celled organisms that can reproduce sort of led to what we see today just through evolutionary explanations. So if we go back to that like single-celled organism, maybe it started as a few chemical reactions. Like I don't see why those sort of initial conditions for life are something that needs to be like finely tuned for by a creative entity other than some sort of idea that life is sort of sacred or inherently valuable. Um, so yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, so you're trying to say like because the thought is that there's something striking about like life, right? Like that seems like an
Mhm.
important thing that we need to explain.
Yeah,
And then we get into this stuff about like how it seems finely tuned for life. And the thought here is just going to be that like, it's not clear to you that like life actually is something that really needs to be explained in the same way that it's not clear that we're really that interested in explaining like volcanoes or something. Like it's just not that interesting. Like whether or not the world has
exactly.
volcanoes or whatever doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it is interesting that maybe like the first form of life led to what we see today over billions of years. Like I'm very interested in evolution, but importantly, evolution is a naturalistic explanation. So yeah, I would that's exactly the what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I think is like when I think about like is life something that cries out for an explanation? I'm honestly not sure. Because I mean, I definitely like it strikes me that way. But I think that I can perfectly well explain that in terms of like I'm like a living thing, so of course I'm going to, think that like
Yeah,
I'm important, right? Like I can perfectly well
right.
explain why I think that it cries out for an explanation, and like it's not I don't know, like it's not clear that like me thinking that it needs an explanation because I'm a living thing is like I don't know, like relevantly like truth tracking, I guess. I don't really know like how to say what I'm trying to say here, but yeah, I don't know, like it's not clear to me either exactly that life is something that cries out for explanation. Um,
Yeah, I mean, sort of granting that like life began as like a certain particular configuration of like chemical reactions. Like I don't see how that cries for more of an explanation than just like any other chemical reaction that doesn't sort of produce a reproducing organism. And then like from there, like I say, we can explain how we got from there to where we are through evolution.
yeah, so to be clear, right? I mean, consider a world where you have like chemical reactions and it just like never gives rise to life. Like you think that's like just as good or just as interesting or whatever a universe is the one we have, even if maybe it like or at the very least you think that like maybe it doesn't seem that way to you because like you're a living thing but like you think you're biased and like if you could
Yeah,
unbias yourself it would be the case that those universes are like equivalently sort of good or interesting or whatever.
I think that's exactly right. Yes, that's exactly what I think.
Yeah. So I think that I don't want to take too heavy a stance on that. I'll just say I'm agnostic, but it's at least not clear to me that that's a mistaken kind of objection. But
Mhm.
even just granting that life is something that cries out for an explanation, it's just, yeah, it's still not clear to me that naturalists have like inadequate tools to deal with fine tuning. I mean, again, you can just take like what Graham Oppy thinks about possible worlds, right? I mean, it's just going to turn out that like the constants we have are necessary, right? Because all the possible worlds are going to share the constants of the actual world, so it just becomes like a necessary feature of the world.
Right.
So that's one thing you could think, or I don't know. I mean, even think that just like grant that the constants of nature are just like contingent, right? There's just no explanation for them. They're just like brute contingency. I think that you know, even then, like your case is a lot like worse, maybe, but it's not clear that theism does any better. I mean, what like you're gonna have problems with like divine like psychology, right? Like, why is it that God has like any interest at all, really, in creating like a life permitting universe? And it's like, well, because it's good, I guess, right? Maybe, but I mean, you have to just like assume right from the outset. You have to like introduce this kind of like posit that like God is like morally perfect or whatever. But like, I don't know, it's just like a posit on your end, right? But if you're allowed to just posit stuff to do explanatory work, so can the naturalist, right? Like, there's just like some sort of mechanism in the universe that selects for life permitting universes or something, right? Like, we're just like positing stuff to do explanatory work. Like, I don't know, it seems like
Right.
fair game. Um,
Yeah. And I
another
totally
thing,
agree with all that.
yeah,
Yeah.
another thing too is like I'm sympathetic to a kind of like modal skepticism, right? So like when I think about what a possible world actually is, I'm not really sure what to think exactly, but I think like I'm more and more sort of skeptical like the farther away we get from like the actual world. So um to illustrate, if you think that it's a possible world that, you wore like a different color shirt today, right? I don't know, sure. I mean, that seems right. It seems like you have capacities that I know about already to like wear different shirts. So it's a possible world
Mhm.
where you're like you wear a different shirt. I don't know. Okay, fine. But like when you start the more you make me like squint at like possible worlds, like the farther away we get, like the more sort of skeptical I get that they're like actually possible worlds. So is there a possible world where like you have wings and fly? I really am not sure, right? I get more and more skeptical about that sort of thing the farther away we get. And so when you think about like the constants of nature, right? And like just messing with those, can those like to what extent can you actually mess with those, right? I have no idea. Like, but that seems pretty far removed from the kind of thing that I would want to say is a possible world. Like, could you change the constants of nature? Like, maybe, but like, I don't know, right? I'm sort of skeptical, right? Just because that's like really far away from my everyday experience, and so I don't really know what to say other than I don't even know if that's a possible world, really. So
Yeah, that's a good point. And going back to what I said first, like even if we grant that you can mess with the constants, like we don't actually know that different constants couldn't lead to like a different form of sentient life. So, this is an iffy objection. I will say this is one, like we've mentioned in the video before, this is one of the more thought-provoking objections to an atheist naturalist view that I've heard, but again, don't think it works.
yeah. I want to agree with you too on the last thing you said, which is like, if you change the constants, like, maybe like, because usually they talk about like one constant at a time and then like the universe collapses. But like, what if you change like multiple constants at once? Then it's just like not, I have no idea how many like life permitting universes there would be. Granting that you can change the constants, right? Which again, I don't know if you can. I don't know if that's a possible world or not where like that actually can happen. But um, yeah, I mean, suppose you could, and suppose you just start messing with all the constants, or suppose you start messing with like laws of nature, right? Not just the constants, but like whole laws of nature, or like psychophysical laws, right? So that like basically any universe could contain life because like the psychophysical laws are just so lax that like anything can be like conscious, right?
Right.
I have no idea like what the probabilities turn out to be there because like I have no like how am I even supposed to come up with a probability for that? Like I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's just based on a lot of uncertainty.
All right. So I guess that's what we think about fine tuning then. That
Yeah.
was a bit of a
Now we'll
sidetrack, but it's important to get that out of the way, I guess.
we'll see if he brings it up. Then we can say we addressed it.
Some atheist creators seem to think that the recent presidential election was so important that it changes the way they should do things on their channels. Watch.
I am going to be changing things up on YouTube quite a bit to the extent that I'm not going to be doing this channel anymore. So I don't think the timing is lost on anybody here that this is happening shortly after the last political election. I'm not going to lie, very, very distraught and a little freaked out by the results, not just who won, but the extent by which they won. And that does get us all thinking about our future and our safety and what things are going to look like going forward. Basically, what that did is that just jolted me. For a while, I just kind of been on the treadmill doing what I was doing. I wanted to get off at some point and doing something different. And so this election and the little jolt that it gave me just kind of pushed me off the algorithm treadmill and gave me the prompt to just do something a little different.
I am shifting gears a little bit here and widening the lens. It's my last video conversation. I didn't want it to set the tone for future videos, and I didn't want to get.
I don't think I'm gonna really comment on this one, so I'll just like skip to the next one
Yeah,
unless you want to say something about it.
I doubt it. Let's skip.
Into politics, but I
Atheist.
mind.
Why do you think that this election was so impactful to atheism? 3. Many atheists are determinists, meaning that they don't believe in free will, at least not of the sort that many people think of when they hear the term free will. They believe that the past history of the universe is like to a billion trains of dominoes or trillions of chains of dominoes that result in the past history of the cosmos, the formation of your physical body, your past life experiences, your neural structure, and the firings of neurons in your brain that are your choices, but could not have been otherwise. On the other hand, maybe some atheists think that we have what's called libertarian freedom, the notion that whatever you ended up choosing, you really could have done otherwise. So here's my question. If you're a determinist, how do we hold people morally culpable for things they do that could not have been otherwise, given the history of the universe? And if it is the case that you believe in free will of the libertarian sort as an atheist, how is that possible without God? Now, just as a note, there are many determinists who will say they are compatibilists. And what that means is not that libertarian freedom is compatible with determinism. Compatibilists hold that determinism is true. It's just that we can hold people morally culpable in spite of the determinism. That moral culpability is possible, is compatible with determinism. So it doesn't answer the question. I'm asking that question. How, if you're a determinist, how is it that people are morally culpable given that their choices could not have been otherwise? And if you believe in free will, how is that possible without God?
Yeah, interesting question. This actually gets into some of the stuff I've been recently writing about with sort of morality. And I guess first of all, what I'll say is I am a determinist and therefore would reject libertarian free will. As for whether I think people can be held morally responsible for their actions, I'm sort of agnostic about. Like, under one framework, we might say that people um, were sort of structurally capable of doing different actions, but ultimately wouldn't have in sort of a metaphysical sense. And under that
Um,
framework, we
yeah, so hang on. By structurally, do you just mean like epistemic? Like it seems like epistemically possible that people could have done things differently, even though like there's no
right.
possible world where they actually do.
Right, like maybe sort of removed from the actual point of action or decision, like a day before, or like from a God's eye view, there are, X amount of contextual factors that could affect which reasons being sort of responds to, and sort of removed from a particular situation at the time that it happens, in which all of those sort of contextual variables are set in stone. We might say that X, Y, and Z reasons have a non-zero probability of influencing a being's behavior in sort of ordinary situations in that being's life. That's what I mean um,
Um,
by structurally available.
are you cashing that out in terms of like probabilities? I guess I'm just wondering, like, if you're cashing it out in terms of probabilities, if you're not um really talking about determinism anymore, because it seems like maybe like if there's like a 70% chance that they do this versus like a 30% chance that they do this other thing, right? That's not like determinism anymore, right? So I guess I'm wondering like how we're cashing this
No,
out.
no, I mean like so in the moment that an action happens, what I'm saying is that there is 100% chance that a being will consider or deliberate over the reasons that it does and do what it does. But sort of like, you know, from a God's eye view, let's say that we recognize that there will be a situation in which a being needs to deliberate, like removed, like, 10 days away or something like that. And we don't know sort of the variables, like what the variables will be set at. What I'm saying is that, like, just sort of broadly speaking, like in any sort of ordinary situation in like Agent X's life, like X, Y, and Z reasons might hold, a certain probability of influencing their behavior based on like highly variable contextual factors, if that makes sense.
That last part sort of throws me off. I think what you're just saying though is like I think you're just trying to distinguish between epistemic possibility and metaphysical, but the last part throws me off, where it's like um, there's like different stuff that's like affecting their behavior. So you're just trying to say though that like we might not know all that stuff. And so, like from the epistemic point of view that we're in, like it seems like people could do lots of different things, but like metaphysically, maybe there's no possible world where there is. Like if
Right.
we had all the relevant information, like if we were God or whatever, we would like know 100% like what they would do.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying. Like what events, yeah, that's more or less what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay.
And to sort of follow from that, like on sort of a epis like that sort of epistemic framework, I would say we still can, hold beings morally responsible in the sense that we can make sort of a descriptive uh evaluation of like different behaviors that they could have, done in sort of an epistemic sense. But I'm also, sympathetic to the idea that if, we're qualifying moral evaluation by saying it requires various metaphysical options to compare against, then clearly we only have one metaphysical option in every case. And so moral evaluation sort of becomes unintelligible. And so under that framework, I would say it would hold that we can't actually hold beings morally responsible for what they do.
Okay, so let me just make sure that I'm following what you're saying. So, um, you want to say that in the actual world, um, determinism holds, and that does sort of undermine like moral responsibility. But you're saying like if we had like a God's eye view, we could know like counterfactually if the world were in such and such a state rather than the one it was actually in, we could still know what people would do. But like we don't as human beings, right? We don't have the God's eye view, so like the epistemic position we're in is not one of complete information. Or I guess I'm just yeah trying to flesh out like what exactly you're committing to here.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, you've got it right. Under the sort of metaphysical framework of like determining sort of what qualifies for moral evaluation, like I think what we'd mean by sort of a descriptive evaluation, like being X did something bad, is really just a description of outcome rather than sort of like a moral evaluation in the way that we mean, like they could have done otherwise. Um, so yeah, under this sort of, you know, God's eye view where we know all the outcomes and stuff, and uh, yeah, and I would say I'm sympathetic to the idea that yeah, we cannot hold, beings morally responsible for their actions.
Okay. So what you mean by like descriptive is like when like because you gave like an ordinary language context where it's like you might say even as a determinist, right? You might say if I stole, that was bad. And what you mean by that's like a sort of descriptive claim is just that like um is that just supposed to be like a gut level reaction that's being like
No, it's
replaced later or
um this act a lot of this gets into what I'm sort of writing about right now, and so it might become clearer if you have a chance to read it.
Hmm.
But the idea is that we're describing sort of the author, like we're describing sort of an axiological like evaluation of a phenomenal badness and what caused it. And that's to me what moral evaluation amounts to. And there's a lot of complexities, with that I'm currently trying to work out. But I would hold that like such a moral fact would be descriptive, not necessarily, normativity doesn't necessarily follow.
Okay, right. So I think I follow what you're saying, but also it's like a little bit weird because this isn't just like about free will anymore, right? Like when you're saying
Yeah.
a moral evaluation is descriptive. I was still trying to figure out what that meant like purely in terms of like the normal kind of free will debate. But yeah, this is tied
Mhm.
to like stuff that you're thinking of in like meta ethics about like what a moral evaluation even amounts to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I gotcha. Um I guess what I
Sorry if
want
that was a
to
little, sorry if that was a little bit of a, you know, interrupted the flow of the video for anyone who's happens to be still watching.
yeah. So I guess my thought on this, a couple of like just preliminary things. It's like he, there's this assumption, right? Like, how is free will possible without God? And like, I'll get to that, but like, how is it possible with God, right? Like, there's just this assumption in the background that like, if God exists, like libertarian free will just like comes for free. How explain how that works? I still don't know
Yeah.
how libertarian free will works, even if God exists. Like, I don't know. It's just like there's this assumption in the background that it like comes for free, but it doesn't, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, and it goes back to, something we discussed earlier in the video. Yeah, I think we brought up that same point before. Um, so yeah.
So then I guess there's this question then of like, am I a determinist? Not necessarily. I don't know. I mean, like, there's a question about like whether I'm a determinist, like in general, which like probably not, because like maybe quantum mechanics like does a lot of work in the world, so like maybe not. But there's like a separate question about like, does quantum mechanics like actually feature in like explanations of like like neural events or like mental events in general? Like, does quantum mechanics like does like chancy stuff have anything to do with like, our sort of like decision making? Maybe not, right? So like then there's a question of like, am I a determinist about like mental events? Maybe, right? I don't know. I guess I'm sort of
Yeah.
agnostic about it. I just don't know enough. But like either way, I guess I'm sort of, I don't know. It depends on the day. Like some days I'm like a compatibilist. Like, yeah, man. As long as you're doing stuff because your reason's responsive, like you did the thing because you wanted to do it, and like, like what else could you want, right? Some days I think that's like, I don't know, pretty compelling. But then there are other days where I just think that's just total copium. Like,
Yeah.
it's not really up to me like what my reasons are. Like I have reasons. I'm definitely reasons responsive. Like I can accept everything the compatibilists want to say, but like um, some days I feel like it's just not really good enough. Like I don't know. Suppose that I find out that like God set up my sort of he set up me in such a way, right, that like I'm sort of determined to do at time t1 I'll do action X, and at time t2 I'll do action Y, and so on and so forth, right? Now just build into this equation the fact that like I'm reasons responsive. Well, why do I do X at t1? Well, because I had reason R, right? Um, it still seems like even with all of this on the table, I mean, there's something to be said that like it still seems like it's just not really good enough. It still seems like ultimately I'm not responsible for what I'm doing. God is, right? And then you just sort of like work your way down, right? You just like substitute God for like your genetic factors and your environmental factors and whatever, right? So I definitely think there's like strong arguments in favor of like like hard incompatibilism, I guess, right? The other end of that is like if you think that's a good argument against compatibilism, then you have to handle libertarian free will. I don't really know how that's supposed to work. In general, I just don't know like what's supposed to explain your actions on libertarianism. Like if it's sort of indeterminate, like why you do X, Y, or Z, like what explains why you do X, Y, or Z, right? Like I don't know, right?
Yeah, and You know, yeah, on the view that like it's reason's responsiveness that sort of gives us free will, like we can perfectly well conceive of, other systems like an advanced enough AI or even animals that are reasons responsive, Animals are reasons responsive, but I doubt, a theist would want to say either of those have free will.
I
Um,
doubt most people would want to say they have free will.
yeah.
I don't know. Like when I think about that, if it turns out that I was a compatibilist who thought that reasons responsiveness was like sufficient,
Hmm.
and it turns out that animals are reasons responsive, which yeah, they are, right? I would just say that yeah, they do have free will. Like I would just like if I were a compatibilist, that's what I would say, right? But yeah, I
Yeah.
guess to the extent that like people are thinking about this and they're like committed for some reason to the idea that animals definitely don't have free will, then yeah, I mean they're gonna run into problems. But yeah, I don't know. I would just accept like if I were a compatibilist, right, I would just be happy to say that animals have free will.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe it's like something further, like ability to sort of self-modify, like the very rules that govern your ability to like change your goals or whatever. But something like that, like how would that work in humans? Like supposedly the rules that govern our ability to change goals is something like genetics. And how do our genetic expressions change? Through stuff like epigenetics, which, is ultimately environmental. And I doubt anyone would want to say that, the stimuli produced by our environment are within our control. And even then, we could also imagine another AI that's sort of uh, able to modify itself in the same way. And doubt they'd want to say that has free will. So,
Yeah, like maybe an AI, right, that like can like switch, certain behaviors on and off or whatever, like based on some sort of goal that we programmed. But
Yeah,
like in a
yeah,
case like that, it's still pretty clear that like it's still just like, ultimately like we're still responsible for like programming it in such a way that it like switches on behaviors in response
right,
to the way that we programmed it or whatever. Yeah, something like that.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um, yeah, that ended up being a little bit long-winded too. I'm not even sure how much we really answered his question. We kind of just talked about free will for a while, but I
Can
guess,
I hear the question again? I want to
yeah.
hear.
Doesn't answer the question. I'm asking morally culpable in spite of the determinism. That moral culpability is possible, is compatible with determinism. So it doesn't answer the question. I'm asking that question. How, if you're a determinist, how is it that people are morally culpable given that their choices could not have been otherwise? And if you believe in free will, how is that possible without God? Number 4,
So maybe it's worth asking a follow-up question then, because like if we're sort of sympathetic to the idea that like, well, it's just not like,
Yeah,
um, then there's a follow-up question like, well, what do you do, right? I mean, if you think that like people aren't sort of ultimately responsible for their actions, right? Or like more, maybe they're like, I mean, they're responsible in like a trivial sense, and like people do stuff, right?
right.
But in like a way that's like sort of morally like culpable, right? In like a basic desert kind of way or whatever, right? Where like they deserve like praise and punishment or whatever.
Yeah,
What do you do then? I think the basic sort of like the gist of like, if I'm committing to this kind of like hard incompatibilist thing, what I'm gonna say is like what most of them say, which is just like we still have like, prudential reasons for like, I don't know, imprisoning people or whatever. Like if somebody like murders someone, like there's still like a threat to public safety, so you still like, get them out of reach of other people so that they don't cause problems, just like you would like a somebody with COVID or whatever. Like you would like keep them quarantined there in their apartment, even though you don't like hold them responsible for like getting COVID. Like you still quarantine them just because like, you have prudential reasons to like keep them away from other people. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say. You don't really like lose any of these prudential reasons to do stuff still.
yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, if we grant that, sort of moral evaluations don't really amount to moral evaluations in the way that we sort of know them. Let's say they just sort of amount to descriptions of outcomes, like being X did something bad, like being X brought about phenomenal badness. Like, um, most people are still sort of motivated by that type of fact, descriptive fact. Like, even if it is just a description of outcomes, like if we say to a being, like, you did something bad, that's usually going to be motivating to them. Like, even if it's not sort of morally evaluable in that sort of sense. Like it's still going to be motivating. And the fact is that most people care about not doing things that bring about phenomenal badness. Um, so, given that, I don't really see what the problem is.
All right. Was that 3 or 4? I think we're on 4 now, right?
Yeah.
Richard Dawkins has long been praised by atheists as
Oh, is this the cultural Christian thing? I hope so. That would be really funny.
one of the four
Yeah, it would be.
horsemen of the new atheism. But recently, he's caused some controversy with some comments about the trans debate. For many atheists, he's right about science when it comes to young earth creationism versus evolution, but he's wrong when it comes to this current cultural debate. Do you personally think he's right or wrong, and why? Now,
Um, yeah, do you want me to tackle this first, or do you want to go, or?
To be honest, my mind was still sort of lingering on that last question. I kind of missed most of what he said. Can you summarize?
Yeah, so the basic sort of thrust is Richard Dawkins is like a famous atheist guy, and he's like a really famous science communicator. And given that he's a really famous science communicator, like why don't like a lot of atheists are also like trans friendly, right? So like why don't you take what Richard Dawkins, science man, says about trans people seriously? Is basically what he's getting at.
Huh. Why don't we just sort of like blindly appeal to authority is the question?
Well, that's what I was thinking too. Yeah, my thought was
Yeah.
just that Richard Dawkins can be right about some things and be wrong about other things. Like, there's no problem.
Yeah, okay. Let's move on.
He does ask though if we agree with Dawkins about the trans stuff. So Dawkins, I don't know like what specifically his views are. My impression is just that he's like a sort of essentialist guy. Like it's just like like you're a guy if like you have certain chromosomes or whatever. I don't know. I don't know like what Dawkins wants to say specifically. Like I don't know, right? I don't like follow Richard Dawkins about like, his opinions on trans people, so I don't know. But to the extent that he's like not trans friendly, then yeah, I don't agree with Dawkins about that, I guess. Like
Yeah, me too. I can't say much because yeah, I don't know his specific position, but yeah, in general, I find anti-trans arguments to be flawed.
For this last question, there's a little bit of setup. Here's a quote from Robin Collins about the fine tuning of the universe, and I'd like to know what your reaction to it is. Suppose we went on a mission to Mars and found a domed structure in which everything was set up just right for life to exist. The temperature, for example, was set to around 70 degrees Fahrenheit and the humidity was at 50%. Moreover, there was an oxygen recycling system, an energy gathering system, and a whole system for the production of food. Put simply, the dome structure appeared to be a fully functioning biosphere. What conclusion would we draw from finding this structure? Would we draw the conclusion that it just happened to form by chance? Certainly not. Instead, we would unanimously conclude that it was designed by some intelligent being. Why would we draw this conclusion? Because an intelligent designer appears to be the only plausible explanation for the existence of the structure. That is the only alternative explanation we can think of, that the structure was formed by some natural process, seems extremely unlikely. Of course, it is possible that, for example, through some volcanic eruption, various metals and other compounds could have formed and then separated out in just the right way to produce the biosphere. But such a scenario strikes us as extraordinary unlikely, thus making this alternative explanation unbelievable. The universe is analogous to such a biosphere, according to recent findings in physics. Almost everything about the basic structure of the universe, for example, the fundamental laws and parameters of physics and the initial distribution of matter and energy, is balanced on a razor's edge for life to occur. As the eminent Princeton physicist Freeman Dyson notes, quote, "There are many lucky accidents in physics. Without such accidents, water could not exist as liquid, chains of carbon atoms could not form complex organic molecules, and hydrogen atoms could not form breakable bridges between molecules. In short, life as we know it would be impossible." Now, he goes on to say the following. A few examples from the literature of this fine-tuning are listed below. 1, if the initial explosion of the Big Bang had differed in strength by as little as 1 part in 10 to the 60th, the universe would have either quickly collapsed back on itself or expanded too quickly for stars to form. In either case, life would be impossible. As John Jefferson Davis points out, an accuracy of 1 part in 10 to the 60th can be compared to firing a bullet at a 1-inch target on the other side of the observable universe, 20 billion light years away, and hitting the target. 2, calculations indicate that if the strong nuclear force, the force that binds protons and neutrons together in an atom, had been stronger or weaker by as little as 5%, life would be impossible. 3, calculations by Brandon Carter show that if gravity had been stronger or weaker by 1 part in 10 to the 40th, then life-sustaining stars like the sun could not exist. This would most likely make life impossible. 4, if the neutron were not about 1.001 times the mass of the proton, all protons would have decayed into neutrons, or all neutrons would have decayed into protons, and thus life would not be possible. 5, if the electromagnetic force were slightly stronger or weaker, life would be impossible for a variety of different reasons. Now, these are some of the kinds of facts that are often used to make fine-tuning arguments, some of the best arguments for God's existence according to almost everyone involved. So here's the question. Are we wrong to think that this supports theism? If so, why?
Yeah, so I guess just very quickly, I mean, most of that was just like science fact. I don't think any of that really has, none of that really affects anything that I said earlier. So I'm happy to just like say what I said earlier, but also like, I'm just going to deny the analogy to like the dome or whatever. Like I have lots of background knowledge about like, oxygen recycling technology and whatever. And like, I know like just from my background knowledge about the world, like that stuff doesn't show up spontaneously. So yeah, in that case, I would have good reason to think that like there's an intelligent designer, but I'm just going to reject that that's analogous to like the constants of nature. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it that dome supposedly exists in a universe where, intelligent beings like us might exist. So you still need to sort of explain where we came from. And then that's when you start to get into like supernatural beings, which is a different type of sort of would be a different type of creative force. I don't even know what it would amount to since it's supernatural. But yeah, I'm gonna say the same things, like all of those facts, all yada yada yada. It's this unlikely and whatever. It's that unlikely for life as we know it to occur, like I said before. And also, again, I don't really think a world with life as we know it is any more interesting than, a world without it, in sort of the important sense. Life didn't happen until like what, 4 billion years after the universe started. Like there might be a certain probability of a variety of certain like configurations of chemical reactions to occur, and a lot of them may occur like every once in a while, just as we're leading up to this. And sort of the starting conditions for life are one of those reactions that might occur. Like given enough time, like wouldn't we expect them to? Like I don't think it's any more interesting than a world with just like, chemical, other types of chemical reactions occurring. So just to reiterate.
Um, yeah, so some of that is like, let me just make sure I know like for sure what you're saying. So, I mean, part of it is like that you think given enough time, like life would arise in the actual world, and there's nothing surprising about that. Is that just like sort of a side point? Because like
It's yeah, it's
because
sort of a
the
side point. Yeah.
okay, yeah, because the fine
And
tuning
like,
thing is just going to say like we can accept that obviously, but like the point is just that like we live in a universe that supports life at all. So just like pointing out that like in this universe, given enough time, life is going to show up is just going to like I
yeah,
don't know. I think they're just not going to
I,
care.
I think the force behind that side point sort of resides in that, like I mentioned, like there's like a set of particular configurations of chemical reactions that may occur, and like one of them might lead to sort of a reproducing organism, like maybe more than one do, and maybe they would be different types of organisms. It just sort of goes back to what I said about like life as we know it has this probability. And at an even deeper level, if we changed the constituting parts of the universe, maybe there would be other ways for life to arise
Okay.
in
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of a
yeah.
different way.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so yeah, like really near the end there, some of the we kind of just like explored like different areas of philosophy for a while. I got like definitely for me at least a lot more interesting near the end here.
Yeah, agreed. It did build from his questions, but so yeah, what bravo to the 2025 questions, I guess.
Um, all right. I think we can wrap up our video there then. Where were we even doing this on? Was this on Zoom? Yeah, it was on Zoom, right?
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, about all that morality stuff, I'm still trying to kind of work all that stuff out. There's a reason I'm still working on my essay about all that stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when we get a chance to just sort of like sit and do philosophy again, I would be super interested in just like chatting about the work you're doing on metaethics because I'll admit like some of it I did my best to follow, but like it's a little bit I'm not sure I totally followed all of it. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, once you kind of like have it more organized or whatever, I think it would be like super cool to just sit down and like chat about it.
Yeah, and I sometimes it's a little harder to like articulate in real time what you're trying to say rather than like, you know, an essay that you sat down and worked through and clarified. So that might be more illuminating. And, broadly, what I'll say is that at this point, I am pretty much with you that like normatively charged moral facts, I don't think exist. Like, I don't think that's, a
Yeah,
thing
so
at all.
that's just to say you think that like um reasons are always sort of like instrumental, right? There's no like intrinsic like reason to like do something is basically what you're saying there, right?
Pretty much, or that like an ought doesn't necessarily follow from like a description of outcome, like Agent X did something bad. Well, what if Agent X doesn't care about doing something bad?
Yeah, so
They
that's
can
just to
just,
say like knowing that something is bad does not give you a reason to not do it.
right, you need some sort of motivational pull, and I think that comes from elsewhere than just
Yeah.
like such a description itself. Um, and the thing I'm trying to work out now is like whether hard determinism sort of allows for moral evaluation in the way that I've set it up in my paper, and I'm not sure it does. So I don't know if like moral facts in the way I currently understand them are actually sort of morally evaluative rather than just like describing an outcome and a cause of the outcome. Um, and by
Um,
morally evaluative, I mean
yeah.
like, like different reasons were at play and like could have been acted on in some sense. Um, of course, in the metaphysical sense, they couldn't have been. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of trying to work out right now.
Yeah, so let me make a sort of distinction that maybe will shed some light on this, maybe it won't. Um, because some of the language here is a little bit loose, I think. I'm not quite sure what you mean. So, like, when you're thinking about moral evaluations, I guess like it seems like so your position is a realist one, so it seems like you're going to want to say like definitely that you can make moral evaluations such as X is wrong is true or false or whatever, right? I mean that sort of evaluation is definitely going to be on the table for you, right?
Right. But here's the problem though, like I think evaluation is sort of inherently comparative. Like if there aren't other options to compare what was done against, I don't think that's an evaluation so much as a description of what happened.
um that I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, but like to the extent that I do, I guess I'm not sure that seems right to me. So I mean, consider a case where we're thinking about, I don't know, like ways that the stock market could be. Maybe there's only one. Suppose determinism is true, and so there's only one way the stock market could be, right? I mean, it still seems like we can just sort of like run thought experiments or whatever about the way it could have been, and I don't know, like think about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what I am trying to get at, like what it could have been in some other sense, like that might create options to compare against. Like that's exactly what I'm trying to work out. Like if it makes sense to compare against options that were like available in some other sense than metaphysically.
Right. Yeah, okay. I mean, that's interesting. I guess like my thought would just be yeah, like as long as there's like epistemic options, right? Like for all you know, when you just sort of like sit down on the armchair and like you're not committed to like determinism or something, right? It just seems like maybe
Mhm.
this other stuff could have happened, right? Um
Right.
yeah, like there's that kind of like epistemic possibility. Maybe that's like a way to sort of cash out comparisons. I don't know. I don't see anything
Yeah.
particularly strange about that, but yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, for sure. So I think you'll be interested in my paper then. I'm getting close to being done with it. Um, but yeah, sort of to describe what I mean by like a moral fact. It's a description of an outcome, but it's like comparative against something that could have happened. So like what a moral fact would assert is something like Agent X acted inoptimally, speaking from like a phenomenal axiological stance about like valence or whatever. And they could have acted more optimally given like reasons responsive behavior or like some sort of alternatives that were available to them in some sense. And I think that breaks down basically if there are not alternatives to them. And so if you want to say that, you know, we need metaphysically available options to compare against, then I think, yeah, moral evaluation in that sort of sense breaks down.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, some of the language there I still am not quite sure that I follow, but I think probably it would be best just to wait for you to polish up the essay you're working on, have me read that, and then we can just come visit it then.
Well, another thing to consider is that like obviously I'm not as familiar with the like philosophical jargon as you, so I don't know if it'll help for you to read my paper. There might be some language in there that's unclear too. So like, could you describe exactly what words I'm saying or like what language I'm saying that isn't clear to you?
Yeah, so when you say axiological phenomenal valence, that was like one string there that to me just sort of sounded like buzzwords. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, I mean, I define those things in the paper. So let's just, yeah, let's just wait because those things will be clarified when you read
Okay.
it.
Yeah. All
All
right,
right.
sweet, man.
All right, cool. Um, well, yeah, I think this was really fun actually.